Hello, my name's Steve and welcome to the Seaside Allotment channel, and today I thought we would just do a look around the polytunnel. I've had this now since I think April this year and it's been fantastic. So I thought we'd look around the polytunnel and all the kind of pros and cons, design features, amendments that we've made to it, and basically some guidance for other people thinking about getting a polytunnel. And maybe some hints and tips for other people who've already got a polytunnel, and hopefully some hints and tips for me from people who are a bit more experienced with the polytunnel than me. So yeah, let's have a look around. So first off, this is a look inside, and polytunnel runs from the end that I'm at, which is roughly east to west, and so it gets sun coming in this direction, which seems just perfect. Everything gets a lovely amount of sun all year round. Polytunnel's got two big double doors at each end, and let's just have a closer look. So each door has got a mesh panel on it, whether you can just see the mesh there, and it's covered by a sheet of perspex, which is just held in place by these little toggles, so I can have as much ventilation through the doors as I want. I can control how far I open and close the doors because I got these positioning holes here. That's fully closed, and that's open about 6 inches, and so it's a doddle to just do that. And it's really good in the worst of weather to be able to have it nice and secure into these big immovable concrete slabs. I often at night just leave the doors open like that, roughly, at both ends, and so they get quite a lot of nice ventilation. And depending on the wind direction, I'll sometimes have the doors in all sorts of different combinations, basically. So let's have a look around the outside of the tunnel and see what we've done. So the first thing that we've done, as I say, is put these panels in. We put handles on the doors, which is really nice. We also put these little hooks which hold the doors really nice and firmly closed, and you can just see that, if I can manage it there, pulls the door really tight closed, and it really does improve the rigidity on the worst of the windy days. So what else have we got? Let's look at the water situation. So I've got this gutter down here, and I have another video that shows how we built this gutter, but basically it's worked fantastically. We've got posts sunk into the ground, and then just a traditional gutter attached to those posts, and then on the sides here we've got double-sided sticky tape which is direct onto the outside of the polytunnel, and then we've got a polythene skirt effectively that's fastened to the double-sided sticky tape, and then we've got polytunnel repair tape that overlaps over, so the double-sided sticky tape never gets wet because it's completely sealed, and then we've got the skirt which is into the gutter, and then we've got black double-sided sticky tape here which holds the skirt into the base of the gutter, and then that's sealed in again with polytunnel repair tape. So we've got a fantastic gutter there, and we can collect a lot of water off the polytunnel, and that goes into this container here, and then we've got a little pump here which lets me move water out of this to anywhere I need it, but most of the time it overflows into this container here, and this is a nice wide access there, and so I can just dip my watering can in there and it works brilliantly. And you can see there's a fitting on the end there which allows me to add a hose pipe so I can pump the water wherever I want to. Takes me about 2 minutes pumping to fill this blue water container here, so that's not too bad at all. Nice bit of exercise, and I got all my other water butts around here as well, but that's nothing to do with the polytunnel. So here I've got my tap water supply. We've no tap water at the moment on the allotment, but I bring it in these containers, and I use this for washing everything when I'm doing the harvesting. I really like washing and drying everything here when I'm harvesting, because it's a messy, wet job, and really convenient to do it here, and I have loads of space, as you'll see in a minute. So looking at the outside of the polytunnel, you can see that I've got a windsock, and that is really, really useful because it lets me see exactly which way the wind's blowing and gives me really immediate feedback on which doors to open and how far. I'm really happy with that. All the way around the outside, you can see the skirt of the polytunnel is fastened and sealed under this piece of wood, and it's a double wrapped seal, and so nothing, basically no creepy crawlies or slugs or snails or anything like that is going to get under there. The whole of the polytunnel, apart from the doors, is sealed in that way, and that's really great. The polytunnel is on rails, the polythene is attached to base rails, and I have 2 inches of additional space underneath those base rails. You can see that there, and that means I can tighten the polytunnel in future as much as I want, but for now it doesn't matter at all that the base rails are a few inches off the floor, because the skirt is sealed. So I strongly recommend that, because even though this polytunnel is really nice and taut at the moment, over time it'll need retensioning, and that's an easy job to do. So I'm at the other end of the polytunnel, and you can actually see now that the windsock is attached to the polytunnel door, and so it moves as the door opens, and you can see how it's attached there. It's just an extra piece of wood fastened to the door frame. Okay, let's have a look inside the polytunnel. So basically I've got my containers there for the harvests, and this is my big trestle table, and I made this myself, and it's just attached to these little legs here, but I'll talk about the trestle table first. So this has been fantastic. I'm very, very pleased. It doesn't really interfere with growth unless there's stuff growing all on it, but most of the time we use this trestle table for probably about 6 months of the year. We're primarily using it for harvests. It allows me to get out of the bad weather, and I'll fill this whole table here with the harvest boxes, and we can harvest. Debbie and I can just be bringing stuff in here. We get it all nice and clean and washed, and then boxed up in here, and we're just nice and cozy while we're doing all that wet work, and all the veg isn't blowing out of the boxes all the time, which is what used to happen before we had the polytunnel. Now, by springtime, we'll start building out down here, and eventually, the whole of the polytunnel by sort of mid-spring is covered with growing trays. These are the growing trays I use, and there's, I don't need to have that much growing underneath at that time, but I will have brassicas and things like that down there, for early brassicas, and they don't mind a little bit of shade, so that's not a challenge at all. And then of course they'll all be cleared by late spring, because everything will be planted outside, and then we'll transition to strawberries, and all of my tomato plants and peppers and things like that. So at the moment, most of what I have are salads. So there's salads all the way down this bed, and this salad bed is interplanted with garlic. This salad bed is interplanted with spring onions. I decided on raised beds in here because the soil quality isn't that great. It's just very loose sandy soil, but the beds are open all the way through to that sandy soil, so everything can grow as deep as it wants. The beds are full of a mix of well rotted horse manure and spent mushroom compost, and that's worked really well. Very little weed pressure in here, which is lovely. Yeah, the beds have been great. We do have a few slugs that have got in. Can't really keep slugs out because they're almost certainly already in the growing media. keep the watering cans in here. At the ends I've got space for large containers, and so I've got peas in here, for example, but I'll also, next year I'll have courgettes in here. I'm always growing early stuff kind of tucked into these corners where it's lovely and warm, and it's a great place to start things off, and then I can drag the containers out and move them into the centre growing area all the way down here where the chair is at the moment, and this will be full of containers. So soon it'll be full of strawberries in February time, and then it'll be full of beans and peas in containers and all sorts of different things. But basically this is my very flexible growing space where I start things off and then I move them outside, and that's why I've got all that space. Well, not just that, but it just gives me a really nice sense, and a non-claustrophobic sense in the polytunnel. But basically this black area is all for temporary growing, basically. So soon I'll have carrots in here in big containers. Again, they'll get dragged outside later on. What else have I got? Yeah, so I just keep things overwintering in here. So I've got overwintering runner beans, and I've got overwintering carrots, I've got overwintering brassicas down here. Just loads of stuff that'll be overwintered and move outside or get planted into the polytunnel beds later on in the season. I'm storing my Christmas potatoes there now that frost has killed those off. And then this is my biggest growing bed. It's got brassicas in at the moment, interplanted with salad rocket and some Chinese cabbages and some cauliflowers and kales, all sorts of different things. This is a bit of a trial bed at the moment just to see how things grow, but it also means that in winter, in the foulest weather, I can still come in here and get a really lovely harvest. And since we're self-sufficient in veg, it's just really important to have somewhere where we can harvest year round. And then I've got another salad bed down here. I've got a bit of sorrel in here, and some celery as well, which I'm overwintering. And then I've got my temporary growing bench here, and this is only here up until probably early summer actually. And yeah, this is a lovely little place just to put trays of seedlings, where I'm trying to keep my main trestle table clear because of the low light levels at this time of year, so I'm trying to maximise that. And I've got overwintering brassicas here, and I've got some strawberries that I just potted up, some last few runners. Yeah, lots of goodies all the way along here. And then attached to this I've got fleece, and I've got another video about how I do this fleecing, but basically it just clips on here. It's out of the way because that's the north face over there. It's not shading anything, and then I can just drop that fleece down over this bed, the whole of the bed. It comes all the way out to this blue line here, so anything I want in containers or in that bed gets completely protected from the frost. Super convenient, takes only a few seconds to lay it down there, and it actually provides a little bit of a buffer from the cold north face of the polytunnel as well, so everything really thrives with that in place. As I say, it doesn't get in the way at all. So later on in the year, what happens is all this bed gets cleared, and then I have these halos. These just get stuck into the beds. You water into the outer ring, you feed into the inner ring. Obviously that centre piece comes out, and the water goes deep through these little spikes into the soil. So you water the root zone, no water goes anywhere near the centre of the plant, so they grow beautifully, tomatoes and cucumbers and the like. So let's just have a quick look what this will look like in late spring. So I will have, in these areas, I'll have courgettes. In here I'll have early potatoes, and then in the corners I'll have cucumbers or all sorts of kind of exotics like mini kiwis and things like that, trumpettinos and things, all these sorts of things. So corners will be full with those, and those corners as well. Then down here I'll have tomatoes all the way along the back, and they will climb up strings that are attached to the crop bars up here. And then all the way down the front, I'll have, in front of the tomatoes, I'll have the peppers. I did grow peppers on the bench last time, on the trestle table rather, but it was just fiddly watering them because I had to come down twice a day and things like that. So it's nice in summer when we're out and about a lot to come down just once a day, and by having them in the ground, of course, you know, that's no problem at all. As I say, these beds are open to the soil below, so the plants put down deep, lovely deep roots, and they need watering once a day into those halos. So up in the roof, I've got lots of crop bars everywhere, which is fantastic because the big containers that will run down here in summer, down the centre, those go up into the crop bars and into the roof, and provide a little bit of much needed shade. So we have all sorts of different plants growing up into the roof from containers. It works really nicely. I've got these little clips that I attach up here, and this just lets me hang any tools that I want to keep inside. I'm always losing things, so it's just really convenient to have those there. And just like seed packets that I'm currently, I need to plant tomorrow, I'll just stick them up there so I don't forget. Use these crop bars for drying, so this is the bag that I use to spin the veg. So I harvest into water, and into buckets, which you can see down there, that are full of water, and then I spin them in this bag to get the water off. So that works really well. No fancy salad spinners for me, and of course I dry my towels and things like that as well. And at this end, same thing, got mesh in the doors, and then perspex on the outside when I don't need that ventilation. And actually the doors have a little bit of ventilation anyway, because as you can see there's gaps all the way around them. So even when the doors are closed, there's ventilation above the doors, there's ventilation below the doors, which is quite nice. I do keep an eye on the temperature and the humidity in here, and it's a very cloudy, not so nice day today, but still reasonably nice temperature. It's 10 degrees outside, 14 degrees in here, but because I've got the double doors open at the moment, it's not really warming up very much. I do have a little Bluetooth thermometer and humidity sensor as well, and that just tracks the temperature 24 hours a day, and I can pick that up on my mobile phone and just review what's actually happening overnight and things like that, which is quite nice. Let's have a quick look at this trestle table. So it's an aluminium tube fastened to the upright hoop, and I got these, and they're pretty cheap, I think about £15, something like that. I fastened them to the raised bed down there, and they're extremely sturdy once they're all fastened together. And then on top of the aluminium, I just fastened a board with one of these U-clips here, and yeah, this board then is extremely sturdy, and then the trestle table just lays on top of the board, and so you can just lift it all off and remove it if you want to, which is really convenient. So each trestle table is 5 foot long. Any of them can just be removed, and I'll show you where I store them in a minute. So that's really convenient. If I'm growing anything big or anything needs more light, I can just take the trestle tables out, which is, yeah, that's proved a really nice design decision. I'll just point out that my little shelf down here is basically as simple as you can get. So just looped a bit of wire through this bracing bar here, and just looped it through 2 hooks, and so it's just as easy as pie to remove this little trestle table. Just unhook it there, hang that cable out of the way for next year just by looping it up and hanging it up here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just got a little clip, you might be able to see at the back there, that just stops it swinging in the wind. So we just have a very quick look at the outside of the polytunnel. I've got a little bed here which is going to be my nursery bed, so I can keep an eye on my leeks and my brassicas and things like that, anything that I'm growing in this nursery bed. So that's really convenient because I'm always in and out here, so I get a good keep an eye on it. I've got this little utility area here, and this is where I stage stuff. So this will, in spring, this will be full of more containers that are basically being hardened off. So if I'm hardening off my potatoes, they'll be out here, and then they're quick and easy to move inside. I've got another utility area outside there, but I'll show you that in a minute. The other end, I've got another little utility area here. This will be stacked up with containers, and then down the side I've got my storage area where I can store cold frame tops, and I can store trestle tables and things like that, and they just fasten to this pallet fence, which is extremely sturdy. You can see these stakes here, they go 3 foot into the ground. The wind is not going to blow those away, even in the seaside. So I'm at the other end of the polytunnel now, and this is another little utility area. Now this one is quite useful because it's fairly shaded by the polytunnel itself, and so this is where I'm going to have a lot of brassicas growing, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a little bit of raised storage area here, which will probably go up to about the same size as this water butt, and that will be covered with enviromesh, and that's where I'm going to grow on all of my brassica plants, and I'll kind of show you that. This what I do with those. I grow my brassica plants on quite big. I grow them bigger than this before I plant them, because generally I'm doing a succession, and I'll have something else in the ground that I want to keep for as long as possible, like broad beans or something like that, before I plant my brassicas in the spring. So I'll generally grow them on in pots like this, and probably sort of this sort of height, maybe double that height before I plant them out, and that gives them a good start. And so I need somewhere to put them, and so that's why I'm going to have this staging area outside where I can keep them pest free, in a little bit of shade, so they don't need too much watering, and yeah, just very close by the polytunnel, so I can keep an eye on them. I've got a good idea how I use the polytunnel and how I've designed it. It's obviously I can keep it clean, and the reason for that is because, especially at this time of year, I just wear my normal clothes. I don't have any special clothes for gardening, so I'm always kneeling down to do the harvest and things like that, do a bit of weeding, so I just want to keep everything clean. I can't be bothered with changing clothes or anything like that. Also, I think just keeping it clean reduces disease pressure, and that's pretty important as well. So you see that, primarily what I'm growing in here at the moment are salads, all sorts of different salad plants, including celery and these emergency brassicas, but I'm also preparing the ground for spring. So very soon, the focus really will transition to preparing all the early plants for spring. The salads won't be as important in here in spring, so the primary focus for the polytunnel right now is to have salad plants in late December and January, at a time when the salad plants that are outside in the cold frames and the hoop tunnels are not so good. So that's my objective, and then from kind of mid-February into March, the salad beds outside start growing really strongly. I don't need the salads in here, so then I start transitioning the polytunnel over to its next succession. So very quickly, just looking outside, we've got loads of stuff under cover, and this is fine at the moment at this time of year, but as I say, once you get into December and January, the light levels and the amount of heat that's trapped in these little tunnels isn't sufficient for things to grow very strongly, and that's why we'll transition over to the stuff that's growing in the polytunnel. but come early spring, these are, well, actually late February, March time, these all spring to life, and don't need the polytunnel as much. In the distance there, got a little tiny greenhouse, and I primarily use that for seedlings that I want to keep frost free, because it's a small space. I've got a little inner, well, it's not a greenhouse, plastic greenhouse effectively, in there, and use a bit of fleece as well, and I've got a little tiny paraffin heater so I can keep that frost free. There's the containers that I'll be using for the courgettes and the cucumbers next year. I say they'll go into the corners, and I kind of quite like having those in the corners, you know, out the way of the tomatoes, and it works really nicely because, you know, it's the shaded and warmest sort of spot in the polytunnel there, and it's nice and humid. Whereas these beds, as I say, I keep for the tomatoes. So it's been a long video, so just one more very quick thing to say is that what I found is quite useful is cucumbers in here, and then I transition, in early spring, then I transition to cucumbers outside in summer, and then repot these with new greenhouse cucumbers, which then grow into the autumn as really lovely strong plants. So I don't try and keep my cucumbers going all the way from spring all the way through to autumn. I find they start to die back by then, but put new plants in summer, and that works really nicely. Do the same thing with my tomatoes, because I need to clear these beds by October to get them all planted up. I still got tomatoes in here, so obviously we pick those, but by then I'll have tomatoes growing in here in pots on these benches, and they will take over, and eventually those pots migrate home into the conservatory, which is where they are now. So I'm still picking tomatoes from the conservatory, which is lovely, but it means I can get these beds cleared and planted, even with the you know, without losing access to tomatoes and cucumbers. I'll call that a day. And as I say, I'm only a newbie gardener, only been gardening for a couple of years, only had the polytunnel for not even a year, and so take all this advice with a pinch of salt. That's what I've learned so far, but yeah, I'd love comments and hints and tips from people who are a bit more experienced than me of things to grow, ways to grow things differently, things that may have worked for me this year but maybe won't work for me next year. Take a look at some of my old videos. If you look at the playlist Polytunnel, and you'll get a good idea of what I've been doing all through the year in the polytunnel and what's worked and what hasn't. And yeah, just give me a bit of feedback. All right, bye for now.